Okay, so for the video for the lesson today, we're going to go over the six principles of the Constitution. So we're starting chapter 3 here now, and we're going to dive deep into the Constitution. I will talk about the preamble more next week, but I do want to talk about the principles of why this was established, what the founding fathers were thinking when creating this important document. So number one, popular sovereignty. Well, what is popular sovereignty? I'm going to go back and forth the slides. So, as you can see here, popular sovereignty is just really understanding that the people have the power, right? The government gets its authority from the people, and the leaders are chosen by voting, right? So people choose who they would want to represent them. Okay. So within the sovereignty of the United States, obviously we have elections to choose who the president's going to be, right? When you think about state representatives, okay, when you think about the governor of each state, right? Each state has its own election then for governor, for representative to help with the national government, right? So yeah, it's broken down into different stages, as you can imagine, with the national government and the states. But more or less, popular sovereignty is just giving the rights to the people. The people choose who have the power. All right. So again, if you choose a leader and you're not too happy with them, well, you can vote him out, right? Obviously, you can have, and when the other election comes up, you can choose to vote for someone different. Okay. All right. Next one, limited government. So limited government is just understanding that the government also is bounded by certain set of rules. Okay. And it isn't all that powerful, right? So in other words, the people have the power, right? The government does not, right? I know in certain cases, certain scenarios, it seems like government has too much power, which when you think about COVID-19, right, it's increased the government's role within society. When you think back to, let's say, wartime or a conflict or the Great Depression, right? There are a lot of times where government increases its role. And a lot of people give, obviously kick back against that. But depending on the times, government might increase its role or might obviously relax a little bit. So, in other words, limited government is where the government isn't all powerful, right? And that the people are the ones actually that hold the power. So it only can do the government what the Constitution allows it to do. And again, different events, different circumstances bring on different times. The government, in certain cases, which the people might allow, to increase its role. Let's say during wartime, the Great Depression, or let's say during COVID-19. As you can imagine, as you can see right now, obviously, these policies of COVID-19 are getting drawn back, right? A good example, which you guys mentioned quite a bit with current events, right? Doge doing a pretty good job here calling out the corruption, calling out some of the wasteful spending in government and how we're kind of drawing that back to make it smaller. So, yeah, that's a good example here for limited government. All right, another one. Here's federalism. Okay, so with federalism, this is shared powers. And we'll mention about this actually in a whole chapter after this one. So, chapter 4 is going to be about federalism. But real quick, you have national powers, which is controlled by the national government. And as you can see here, there's a few examples when it comes to maintaining a military, declaring war, establish a postal system, so on and so forth. Right. You have state powers, right? So when it comes to federalism, right, we can't just have all the power held by the national government. And we mentioned this with the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, how they're arguing over these issues. What should have more power, the states or the national government? In this case here, with federalism, this balances things out. So the state has its own set of powers that the national government does not. And this keeps a good balance. Okay. So, in other words, let's just say the national government, right now, it's Republican heavy, right? The Republican Party controls the House, the Senate, and the executive branch. And when you think about other states, though, they might align, let's say, with the Republican Party when it comes to their governor, when it comes to maybe how they voted in the national election, but other states maybe don't. So, a good example, California, New York, these are all typically your Democratic, ran states. So, even though the Republican Party might hold the national powers, right, the national branches, you can see that certain states might lean a little bit more left, and they represent the values of their people. So even though the national government might be red, right, some states might be blue, and that's a good way to balance some powers out, balance some issues out, so that people obviously have their surroundings, their understanding, their interests in line at a more local level. And again, then you have local level, right? So you might have county basis or town, right? Which again, when you think about a mayor, right, or that's a good way to make sure that these powers are balanced out so everybody's happy. So that one political party doesn't control all means of, let's say, society. All right, separation of powers. We talked about this quite a bit. Montesquieu, right? Okay, making sure you have a legislative, executive, and judicial branch, so that one person doesn't dictate what goes on. That one person doesn't control everything, right? So again, legislative branch we mentioned with the Senate, the House of Representatives. Okay, we already mentioned too about how that's broken down when it comes to representation based off of population in the House, and the Senate is equal representation. The executive branch is the president, right? And then you got the judicial branch. Okay, so these are our branches of government, and this is designed to make sure, again, that one person, one political party, one branch doesn't become too powerful. And there's obviously checks and balances interwoven. All right, here's a good example of checks and balances. So I know I talked about this already, but when it comes to creating a law, legislative branch creates the law. The executive branch, the president, signs off on it. So he can either like the bill or maybe not. If he signs off on it, the bill becomes a law. Okay. If he doesn't, he can veto it back. Now, you can see here, legislative branch has the ability to override the veto. Okay. And, well, obviously, when it comes to the power of government, yeah, legislative branch technically has the most power, but these checks and balances make sure that each branch has power over the other. So one doesn't become too strong. And as you can see here, the judicial branch plays a key role in deeming laws constitutional or not. So if the law breaches the Constitution or it breaks the oath with the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, they can shoot that down. So that's a good example of checks and balances. All right, final is judicial review. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the main slide here. Judicial review is really just understanding that, well, the courts can cancel laws if they go against the Constitution, which we already kind of talked about with that last example, right? So in other words, the judicial branch, which was the last branch assembled, created, contains the Supreme Court. They're the ones that understand if laws constitutional or not, and well, they are the protectorates of the Constitution, so that laws don't go against it, right? That laws don't conflict with the tendencies of structure of the Constitution. Anyway, I just wanted to go over the 6 government principles found in the Constitution. So there you go. That's the lesson for today.